My teacher said, "You plagiarized this essay." I said, "Like you plagiarized your book?" I spent 2 weeks writing my essay on identity and belonging for my junior English class. I was proud of it, so I turned it in 3 days early. The next morning, my teacher, Mr. Gardner, pulled me aside after class and said, "I know you didn't write this." I stared at him and said, "What are you talking about?" He folded his arms and said, "This is plagiarism, and we need to have a formal meeting with your parents and the principal." The meeting happened 2 days later in the principal's office. My parents sat next to me looking worried and disappointed. Mr. Gardner had printed out my essay and highlighted sections in yellow. "This essay is far too sophisticated for a high school junior," he said, holding up the pages. "The analytical framework here is quite advanced. Very male-coded thinking." My mom asked what that meant, and he said, "Female students typically approach these topics more emotionally. This reads like something written by someone with more intellectual distance." I said, "I wrote it. I can explain my entire thought process." He gave me this patronizing smile and said, "Did your father help you with this? There's no shame in getting feedback." My dad said, "I didn't help her with anything." Mr. Gardner said, "Girls her age usually focus on personal narratives and feelings. This essay engages with complex theoretical frameworks." I pulled out my laptop and said, "I have all my drafts, my research notes, my browser history showing every source I consulted." Mr. Gardner barely looked at them and said, "Anyone can manufacture that after the fact." The principal asked if he had any concrete proof, and he said, "I've been teaching for 15 years. I know when a student's voice doesn't match their capability." He looked at me and said, "You're a B student in my class solid work, but nothing exceptional. Then suddenly you produce this? It doesn't add up." My mom said, "Maybe she's capable of more than you've been giving her credit for." Mr. Gardner got defensive and started talking about academic integrity. The principal ran it through plagiarism checkers, and they all came back clean. Mr. Gardner looked frustrated and said, "Those programs don't catch everything. Someone clearly helped her write this." I was so angry I wanted to scream. That night I couldn't sleep. I started Googling Mr. Gardner out of pure spite and found his website with a book he published 2 years ago called Teaching Students to Find Their Voice in Writing. I downloaded it and started reading. Something in chapter 3 felt familiar. An entire paragraph was almost word for word from an essay my friend Jake wrote sophomore year. I texted Jake and he sent me his original essay. The match was undeniable. I spent 4 days reading every page and found pieces from at least 8 students. Whole paragraphs lifted directly from their essays. I found my own essay from sophomore year in chapter 7. 3 full paragraphs without any changes. I reached out to every student I could identify, and 6 of them sent me their original essays with dates. I made a document with side-by-side comparisons showing the student work on the left and Mr. Gardner's book on the right. Every piece of student work was dated months before his book was published. The follow-up meeting happened 1 week later. Mr. Gardner walked in looking smug and confident. "I've reviewed everything and I'm certain this is plagiarism. We need to discuss disciplinary action." I said, "Before we do that, can I ask you about your book?" His expression shifted and he said, "What about it?" I pulled out a printed copy with sticky notes marking dozens of pages. I read Teaching Students to Find Their Voice in Writing. I especially liked chapter 7. I opened to the page and started reading. This paragraph about finding authenticity sounds so familiar. Mr. Gardner said, "I don't see what this has to do with your plagiarism." I pulled out my comparison document and slid it across the table. "It sounds familiar because I wrote it 2 years ago. This is my essay from sophomore year. The one you said showed solid work, but nothing exceptional." The principal leaned forward and looked at the document. I kept going. "This section in chapter 3 is from Jake's essay. This part in chapter 5 is from Olivia's essay. I have original documents with dates proving these students wrote this before your book was published." Mr. Gardner's face went red and he said, "You're making false accusations to deflect from your own dishonesty." I handed the principal statements from 6 former students confirming their work appeared in his book without permission. The principal's face went white. Mr. Gardner stood up and said, "She's lying. This is a calculated attack. She plagiarized her essay and now she's trying to destroy my reputation." The principal looked at the dates and said, "These essays were all written months before your publication date." Mr. Gardner started talking about how I was manipulative and clearly capable of orchestrating this scheme. The principal cut him off and said he was calling the school board immediately. I got a public apology and a perfect score on my essay. Mr. Gardner lost his teaching credential and the publisher pulled his book. My essay won the state writing competition 3 months later.